All right, we're going to do a little reading. So, Are You Lonesome Tonight? And we're going to go to the next chapter. Just a quick reminder, she is going to perform at a party for ex-Governor No, who owns the WKNOE TV and radio stations. And he's having a big party, and he likes how she dances and has asked her to be one of the performers at his show. So in this, she's nervous about going. She's thinking that someone might recognize her or the man might even be there. So, but she's committed, and so she's going. All right, here we go. Fall 1953. And by the way, where was she? She was, I don't remember what year she was born, but she, 1939, I think she was 3. So I believe she was born in 1936. She's like a year or two younger than Elvis. But so in fall of 1953, he was 18. So he graduated in June of 53 from high school and was working at an electrician's, for an electrician. He drove a truck making deliveries to the electricians that were actually doing the job, and then he would stay on the job with them as an apprentice, and he was learning how to be an electrician. But he mostly drove the truck. But he's been playing the guitar for a couple of years and singing just around the apartment complex where he lived. He's taken his guitar to school some. He's been in a talent show, and so he is in a little band. He's not like a lead singer or anything. He just kind of plays the guitar and background music, but in the back of his mind, he would like to be a musician and maybe sing in a quartet or something, so a gospel quartet. But he's just trying to kind of make it. So just know that's what's going on in his life, even though we hadn't read about him yet. That's what's going on in his life. And Lucy is 16. So this is in the fall of 53, and she will be 17 in October. So this is probably maybe September. She says fall, so I doubt it's August, so maybe September. Could be early October. So she's about to be 17. Okay, so I followed a homemade map to find the ranch where Mr. No wanted me to perform. It was about a half-hour drive northeast of Monroe, somewhere close to the Mississippi border. The place was like a scene from Gone with the Wind. It was early evening, and the grounds were lit by floodlights that made the weeping willow trees shimmer. Patches of red, white, and pink camellias added color. The white colonial-style house was regal and airy, set off by black shutters and 4 huge white columns at the front entrance that contrasted with the black roof. A veranda with white rails of delicate latticework wrapped around both sides and led to a screened porch in the back. Sounds like a beautiful house. There was a lake about 50 yards from the front porch. Graceful swans and ducks glided over the water. There was a temporary stage set up between the house and the lake, and a big bonfire was blazing about 100 yards to the right. People were everywhere, 1,000 or more. Some were roasting wieners in the bonfire, while others ate from the tables of prepared food scattered around the area. It was an older crowd of politicians and rich businessmen, the kind of men you'd expect ex-Governor No to associate with. I didn't move in those circles, but with so many people, there was a chance of running into someone who knew me. I made myself scarce by walking along the edge of the water. A young man in a bright blue shirt with big white polka dots was staring at me. He acted as if he wanted to approach me and appeared to be struggling with shyness. I ran back to the house, not wanting to wait until he built up his courage. I told the woman in charge of the entertainment that I had to leave early. She said I could go on first and told me to put on my costume. My legs were shaking as I took off my red velvet skirt and black décolleté I say that different in my head than when it comes out of my mouth. Décolleté sweater, which is a sweater coming off your shoulders. A black décolleté sweater and slipped on my dancing clothes. I wasn't nervous about performing. I was afraid of being recognized and beaten when I got home. My costume was from the television show. Beth Breeze, a talk show host at KNOE Radio, frequently assisted me with my stage outfits. She helped me design the one I wore that evening. It was for a segment that called for a wilderness scene, so we cut up a white sheet in fringes and added slashes and tears to give me a wood nymph look. It was one of my favorite dances and was performed to Anna, the same song that played in my audition. I heard my cue and climbed on stage to do my number. I instantly became oblivious of the crowd as I withdrew into my dance. It felt wonderful again. The rush of adrenaline when performing is a thrill I'll never forget. When I finished, the applause almost blew me over. I had never danced before a live audience and was accustomed to the silence of the studio. Now people were clapping and whistling and hollering their approval. I bowed a few times, totally flustered, then ducked back into the house. While I dressed, a haunting voice carried over from the stage area. It sounded like Frank Sinatra. I went to the window to see who was on stage and was surprised to see that it was the same young man with the polka dot shirt who had been staring at me by the lake. He sang with such depth and richness it was gripping. I figured that the crowd would really go wild, but the applause was only moderate. It was an older audience, and they didn't appreciate him. I backed away from the window. The young singer's career plight was the least of my worries. Getting out of there as fast as possible was my main concern. I was able to perform because the man wasn't in town, but he could return at any moment, and if he found me gone, especially at night, a beating would follow. I made my way down the stairs and rushed out the back door, nearly bumping into someone standing nearby. It was the singer. He was out of breath, and his hair was tousled. He grabbed my arm to steady me. I tried to get by him, but he stood in my way. "I loved your dance," he said, smiling brightly. "I enjoyed your song," I mumbled, still trying to get around him. "You're not leaving, are you?" he asked. "I don't even know your name." "Lucy," I said. "What's yours?" I immediately regretted asking. I had to leave. "Elvis Presley." What a strange name, I thought. "Will I see you again?" he asked. "I can't," I said, bowing my head to avoid having to look him in the eye. I said, bowing my head to avoid having him look in my eyes. "Good luck with your singing." You can just see her holding her head down and turning away. I wanted to stay and talk to him. Normally, I would have run away, but he seemed so nice, vulnerable even, and there was something about him that was very attractive. His brown hair was shiny and appeared darker because of the balm he wore. I walked through the crowd saying goodbye to people who complimented me on my dance. Something made me look back. The singer was standing there watching me. Our eyes met, and he smiled. I smiled back, then turned and walked away. Okay, here's a little paragraph that the author inserts. In his early days in 1953, Elvis, then 18, had not yet formed his own style and therefore imitated other successful singers. Friends and associates were often startled at how well he could mimic Sinatra, Dean Martin, or whomever else he wanted to copy. His audience that afternoon was made up of the same generation that would decry him when he became famous. As one old-timer in Monroe told me, "Nobody who'd been at one of James Noe's parties would have given a damn about Elvis Presley, famous or not. He could have done his whole Vegas act, and he'd have still been booed off the stage." That's too funny. But, those people were, from the era of the big bands and the croonies, the people that sang those crooning style songs and the big bands and so, the 30s and 40s. So they were, not used to someone like Elvis. And he wasn't doing all the crazy stuff he did later on yet. He just kind of stood there and sang, but his voice, there was something about his voice that was a lot different. Even though he could mimic others, there was a lot of soul in his voice. Okay, back to Lucy. The singer's smiling face kept flashing in my mind. It was a brief encounter, a few words and a smile, but he made a lasting impression. It's that charisma that he's got. He probably had it all his life. I thought he would probably be very successful one day, and maybe I would have a chance to see him perform somewhere. A couple of weeks later, Mr. Toomey talked me into modeling a shoot at the zoo. I thought it might be fun. When the time drew near, Mr. Toomey dropped the other shoe. I didn't tell you what zoo, he said, laughing. It's the Memphis Zoo. So remember Mr. Toomey's the photographer that works at KNOE, likes to take pictures of her. So he got her a little job, photography job up there, modeling. They were promoting the zoo there and were redoing their flyer, and they wanted someone up there to take some pictures with all the animals. So anyway, by then the arrangements had been made and it was too late to change. Mr. Toomey wasn't even going. He gave me a phone number and told me he had contacted a photographer in Memphis. The man was out of town, so I decided to go. It would give me a chance to see my sister Mary, who was the one who she was closest to, that had gone to Boston with her and now lives in Memphis. So she was going to go see her, and so she told Miss Fowler that Mary was sick and needed help. That Friday, I gathered up my daughters, and Miss Fowler drove us to the train station. It was a long ride to Memphis, about 5 hours, and the girls fidgeted the whole way. My sister came to pick us up. Driving to her house, I noticed how lovely Memphis was, full of trees and colorful flowers, and it seemed so large compared to Monroe. After dinner, I called the photographer, and he came over with a date. We decided to go out. My sister called a babysitter to watch Deborah and Melody and her own young son. They took me to see a hot new singer in town. We went to a club called the Eagle's Nest, a tacky place with tables covered with red checkered tablecloths. They wanted to sit right up front, but I was still so afraid of being seen, even in Memphis. I steered us to a table near the middle. A boring Western band was playing. No one was singing. I asked my sister which one was the hot new singer. She said he wasn't part of the band, that he came on when the band took their breaks. If the singer was playing second fiddle to this dull band, how hot could he be? Now you'll see him, the photographer's date squealed as the band left the small stage. Now you'll see him, she squealed. The house lights dimmed and the solo singer appeared. I was stunned. It was the guy from the party with the funny name. He looked even better than when I had seen him before. He wore a silky white shirt with big billowy sleeves and baggy black pants. It gave him a swashbuckling pirate look. He moved around more than he did at the party, and his hair flopped down over his face. He gave an energetic performance, copying the current hits by Sinatra, Dean Martin, and the other popular singers. He appeared to be staring at me the whole time he sang, which made me uneasy. When he finished, I was again surprised that there was only polite applause. He had really poured his heart out up there, and except for some girls at a table up front, he didn't excite anyone. It didn't seem to bother him, though. Instead of retreating backstage, he came out into the audience and began talking with people in the crowd. I watched him and marveled at how polite and courteous he was to everyone, especially after the lukewarm reception. It was almost as if he was thanking them for listening to him. After talking at some of the tables up front, he started walking straight to our table. He talked to my sister and the other woman, then looked at me and said, "Who's the pretty stranger?" He gave no indication that he remembered me. I was relieved, but disappointed. They told him I was this big-time TV star and model from New Orleans, exaggerating, of course. They told him about my photo session at the zoo the next day, and he was impressed. "You'll love Memphis," he said. "It's a great city. Why don't you let me show you around?" I begged off, saying I'd be working all day and wouldn't be able to get away. We left before he had a chance to give a second performance, if he gave one. When we arrived home, my sister scolded me for refusing the singer's offer. "Lucy, I know about your marriage, if you can call it that. I know what you've been going through. Some of us have spoken to Archbishop Cushing about it in Boston, and he said you don't have to remain married. You can get out of it. You don't have to feel you belong to that man. You can do whatever you want." Though my sister chose her husband, her marriage was also bad, so she was sympathetic. I thanked her for her support and promised to consider what Archbishop Cushing had said. I was up at dawn the next morning preparing for the photo session at the zoo. We had to start early to catch the morning light. I put on a pair of white shorts, an apricot and mint green sleeveless plaid blouse, sounds pretty, and white sandals that tied around my ankles. I bought some tennis shoes to wear afterward because the sandals had wedge heels. Brushing my hair, I thought about the singer. It was the first time in my life I began feeling something for a man. I was torn between enjoying it and accepting the hopelessness of it. The photographer knocked on the door and said it was time to go. It was fun getting in the pens with some of the tamer animals and cavorting with the monkeys. The peacocks screamed at me, but the zebras and llamas were gentle. The photographer wanted me to get near the hippopotamus, but I balked. I especially liked the giraffes because they were so beautiful and graceful. During the shootings, I couldn't help feeling sorry for the animals because they were caged. I was no different. We finished around 3 o'clock. Since my ride wasn't coming until 6, I had some time to wander around. I slipped on my tennis shoes, then walked to the horse stables near the entrance of the zoo. A friend in Chalmette had taught me to ride when I was 8. I wanted to ride the whole 3 hours, but it cost $3 an hour and I needed to save my money. When I went to pay, the man at the counter refused to take it. "You worked hard today," he said. "You'll make us all look good. Go ahead, ride as long as you want." I steered the horse toward a wooded area bordering the zoo. The wind felt good against my face as the horse galloped across the grass. Turning at the edge of the woods, I noticed another horse and rider coming toward me. That bothered me because I wanted to be alone. When the horse stopped right beside me, I looked up and saw the singer, smiling and sitting proud on the chestnut-colored animal. He was dressed casually, but wore a bright scarf around his neck. "Fancy meeting you again," he said. "Why are you following me?" I demanded, trying to sound firm to hide my fear. We were alone, and I knew nothing about him other than the fact that he was a singer. My only experience with the man was filled with violence and horror. "Because I haven't stopped thinking of you since I saw you in Monroe," he said. He did remember. I wanted to know why he didn't say anything at the eagle's nest, but it was difficult to talk because the horse kept moving around. The singer grew serious. He politely, almost meekly said, "I just want to ride with you a while. Is that okay?" He was so nice that I couldn't say no. We rode along the edge of the woods, looking at each other and smiling, but saying little. We came to a place overlooking a lake. He got off his horse and then helped me off mine. It was the first time I didn't cringe at the touch of a man's hand. He paused, looked in my eyes for a moment, squeezed my waist, then smiled and went to tie the horses to a nearby tree. We sat on the grass. "I came here today because I wanted to see you," he said. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again." "Why did you act so strange in the club?" "I don't know. I just sensed you were uncomfortable. I thought it'd be better because the other girls were around. I saw you the moment I walked out on stage. I didn't forget you, Lucy." He looked at me in a way that was so unlike the lustful way the man looked at me. I asked him about his life. He told me that he was poor and wanted to make something of himself so he could help his parents. He didn't want his mother to have to work anymore. He felt the same way I had about my mother. I told him a little about myself and my love for music, but omitted the dark side. We must have made a funny pair, Elvis with his distinctive voice and southern twang, and me with my French accent popping out every other word. Riding back to turn in the horses, he asked if he could see me again. I don't believe that's possible, I said, fighting to keep from crying. I had finally found someone kind, and he appeared to like me, but I was forced to keep brushing him off. It twisted me up inside. He gently placed his hands on my shoulders and turned me around. Lucy, do you believe in miracles? I nodded. I want to tell you something. I've been with a lot of girls, but you have something very special. I saw it from the beginning. It's like something I read once about Lancelot. He kept himself pure and loved only one woman. He was mixed up, I guess, but he could see things others couldn't. I think I'm a little like that. Does this makes any sense? It made a lot of sense. I was surprised that he had read about King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. Those are some of my favorite stories. Elvis was the kind of man I always dreamed about, only meeting him now seemed cruel. I was better off fantasizing about a prince that didn't exist than being tortured by the knowledge of one who did. I really have to go, I insisted. Come to the club tonight, he said. Please, I need to talk to you some more. I have to. We'll go somewhere afterward. He was so insistent that I relented. He made me promise. We led our horses to the stables and said goodbye. That evening I told my sister that someone invited me to see Kate Smith. There was an ad in the newspaper that said she was performing in town. That was my excuse. I didn't want to tell her about the singer. She was happy that I was getting out and all, but pushed me out the door when it came time to leave. She even let me use her car. Okay, so here's some research that the author did, and he's inserting it here. Lucy's sister, Mary DeBarbin, had lived on Lauderdale Street in Memphis, a few blocks down from Lauderdale Courts, where the Presleys lived. So Lauderdale Courts, take a break here to give you some background. Lauderdale Courts was a government-subsidized apartment complex that in 1947, when the Presleys moved to Memphis, they bounced from house to house, and then after they'd been bouncing house to house for a couple of months, they qualified for government housing, and they were put in Lauderdale Courts. So they had been living in, what do you call those houses that, it's like a big house that has 4 rooms in it, and so they had been living in one room, the family, and cooking on these little, 2-burner stove things that plug in, all sleeping in one bed because they didn't have furniture. And so when they moved to Lauderdale Courts, even though it wasn't fancy, it was a 2-bedroom apartment, and to them that was luxury. Elvis had his own room, his parents had their room, and it had furniture in it, and then they had a living area, a den, and a kitchen with a stove and full stove and oven, all that, refrigerator. So they were living a good life for about 3 years. And then when Elvis started doing a little work and his mom went back to work, they started making too much money to stay in the government housing, so they had to move out. So they were living in another one of those houses where they lived in the downstairs area, and another family lived in the upstairs area. And that's where he was when he met Lucy. So back to this. So Lucy's sister lived a few blocks down from Lauderdale Courts, where the Presleys lived. In his early teens, Elvis used to mow her lawn and often played with her young son. A few years later, Elvis began performing at the Eagle's Nest, and although Mary had moved to Peabody Avenue a mile or so from Lauderdale Courts, she kept in touch with Elvis and was excited about his career. She sometimes went to the Eagle's Nest to cheer him on and lend support. And there is also some research, someone did some research, or I read it in biographies, not auto, because Elvis didn't write a book, but in some biographies that Vernon, Elvis' dad, did buy him a lawnmower when he was about 15 or so, and he and some other friends that lived in Lottery Courts, they would go around and mow people's yards. So Mary was one of the ones that he mowed. And so she was supporting his career. And here's what Mary says. When Lucy came up from Monroe for the modeling assignment, I took her to see Elvis's show, Mary told me from her home in Louisiana. He came over to the table after his performance to say hello, as he always did. This time was different. He couldn't take his eyes off Lucy. He was very taken with her. They talked, and he asked her out. The next day, Lucy said she was going to a Kate Smith concert or something. I didn't believe that for a second. She went off somewhere with Elvis. Elvis's infatuation with classic literature played a part in his attraction to Lucy. He was taken by her French accent as well as her beauty. Those who have tried to portray him as an ignorant hillbilly overlook the facts that his favorite subject in school was English, and that throughout his life he was a voracious reader who consumed everything from romantic history and the Bible to the complicated religious, philosophical, and spiritual writings of Theosophist Madame Blavatsky. So he was very well read. All right, back to Lucy's story. I drove to the Eagle's Nest and quickly found a table in the back. The boring band played as before. Then Elvis came on. He looked so handsome. His hair was shiny and neatly combed in place, and his collar was turned up. He was much more subdued this evening and sang a lot of soft, moody ballads. His singing was nothing like the way it would be later. I tried to pay attention to his performance, but my mind kept wandering to my problems. Being there only complicated them. Elvis did a single set, then came over and said, "Let's get out of here." He walked with his chest held high and expanded and moved with determination. He led me to an old but well-kept car, apologizing because it wasn't a late model. Also, I've read that, talking about a well-kept car, he and Vernon would go out there and wax the car and clean it and wipe it down constantly, like every weekend and sometimes in the middle of the week. That's what the people that lived upstairs said to the guy that one of the guys that did a biography on him, that they would look out the window and see Elvis and Vernon out there cleaning the car. So here she says it's a well-kept car, apologizing because it wasn't a late model. It's like a 1943 or something like that. He opened the door for me, then closed it and went around to his side. Before he started the engine, he reached over and touched my hand. "I want to show you my city, the most beautiful city in the world. You don't mind if I'm proud of it, do you?" Loving one's hometown was nothing to be ashamed of. I wished I could love mine. We drove down a beautiful street lined with large colonial homes. "I'll have a house like this one day," he said. "It'll take a lot of work. My plan is to make a record. A person can get rich if they can make a good record. What do you think?" "I think you can do it. Just don't give up. You have to be different to be noticed. I try to be that way when I dance, but I get scared sometimes." "Yeah, I know," he said. "You never know if the people are going to like you or not. You can sing the same song the same way, and one crowd loves it and the next doesn't." He pulled the car into a small lot near a park and asked me if we could walk a bit. I was afraid he was going to ask questions and try to find out more about me. We walked in the cool night for a while, then stopped to sit on a wooden bench. My fears were verified. "Lucy, tell me about your life. What are your dreams? What do you want to do?" I told him an abridged version of my story, starting with my father's death and how that affected my family and forced my mother to work. I left out the part about the marriage. Elvis's face became sad. The similarities between our mothers were something we shared. My mother never had anything pretty," he said, "but I'll make it right. I'll become a success and buy her everything she wants." He paused for a second. Then his face lit up. "And your mama too, Lucy. I'll take care of her if I make it before you do." It was such a warm sentiment. He meant it. He was so sincere. He turned and embraced me. It was a loving embrace between kindred spirits. Slowly, tentatively, my arms rose to squeeze him to me. It felt wonderful. You look so pretty in the moonlight, he said, pulling away to take a look. The words were disturbing. I was afraid and suspicious of men. They told girls how beautiful they were just to have their way with them. But Elvis was different. Elvis was different. But I was frightened and confused about life. I didn't know how to react. Please don't flatter me, I said. I don't like false flattery. You don't know me. He was hurt. He looked like a little boy. I want to know you, he pleaded. I'm telling you the truth, how I feel. Ever since I saw you at that party, I kept hoping that you were more than just pretty. Now I know. I feel the way you think. You have to believe me. I do. I'm sorry. I'm just shy. We stood up and began walking again. Elvis held my hand. Do you have someone? He asked. No. It wasn't a lie, not in the sense he meant. We stopped walking and faced each other. I felt so small in his arms. He bent down and gently kissed me. Time stood still. Can I see you again? I guess so. What was I saying? How could we? This was only going to lead to more trouble. He noticed my hesitance. Lucy, I want you to share something with me. What? Success. I want you to share my success. I smiled weakly, knowing that was improbable. You seem so distant. Let me start over. You seem so distant. What's wrong? I don't mean to, Elvis. Really, just give me time. There are some things I can't speak about right now. It's not that you don't like me. No, that's not it. Just personal things. Come on, let's walk some more. I need to take a drink because my mouth is getting dry. Hold on a second. Okay. We walked in silence for a while. Elvis stopped and pointed to the sky. You see this moon? Remember it. Whenever you see it, think of me and how we will be together again soon. It's getting late, I said. I've got to leave early tomorrow. As we drove back to my car, Elvis kept asking me for my address and phone number. I dodged the question, but he persisted. He wouldn't let me out of the car until I answered him. I finally told him that he could reach me at the television station or the department store. You'll see me soon, he said. Don't worry. It was hard not to. I was certain I'd never see him again, and in a strange way, that hurt as bad as anything I'd ever experienced. The next morning, while waiting to board the train, I was paralyzed with the fear that he would show up at the station and see me clutching my 2 babies. He could never be mine, but I had to keep the dream alive for a little while longer. I needed it. So I want to say something real quick. When Elvis was telling her about taking care of her mother also, just one thing that I know as I've learned so much about Elvis is he took care of so many people. He wanted to provide for his mom and dad, but then he wanted to provide for his family. You know, all the people that moved to Memphis. He would have uncles working for him. Cousins later on, when they got older, were working for him. He had several uncles working at Graceland and cousins in the office. You know, he just was providing for his family. So the fact that she says these things in this book, to me, is proof that she really was talking to him, because there's so many things that he says in this book that sound so much like the Elvis that I've learned about. And so I just thought that's just so telling. He's like, I'm going to buy my mom some pretty things, and then I'll take care of your mama too. And then also when he says to her, there's something he says here that I can't remember what it was. Oh, he wanted her to share in his success. He's such a positive thinker. You know, he was going to be successful. He says, I'll become a success and buy my mama everything she wants. and he wanted Lucy to be a part of his success. He wanted to share that with her already. Isn't that the sweetest thing? Oh, God. Okay, so she hops on the train and heads back home. I returned to my busy but bleak routine. The only relief was dancing and working at Silverstein's. Elvis didn't call, or if he did, no one told me. Then one Saturday, about 2 weeks later, someone at the store motioned me to the phone. "I want to come see you," Elvis said. "I've gotta." That's another thing. And he was saying that to her. I need to see you. When he wants something, he wants it now. So many people have said that he had no patience. And then he wanted it now. So he wants to see her, and he's got to see her right now. I told him he couldn't and gave the excuse that I had to go away on another modeling assignment. "How about tonight then?" he asked. I played along, assuming he was calling from Memphis. "Tonight will be fine. Just fly in like Superman." "I will," he exclaimed. "You just wait." "Actually, I have to work tonight," I said, worrying that he might really show up. "I'm singing at a wedding." He asked me the name of the church and where it was located, and like a fool, I said, "St. Matthew's." He couldn't be serious. I promised I'd see him at another time. That night, I was singing the Alleluia from a choir loft behind the pews. Suddenly, someone began harmonizing behind me. I turned slightly and saw him. Elvis! What a shock! I was in the middle of the song and had to keep singing. He moved up beside me, still singing along, and gently took my hand. We finished the song together. Elvis sang it beautifully. I sang Gounod's Ave Maria next, but it was too Catholic for Elvis' Southern Pentecostal background, so he had to let me solo. The minute I finished, we ducked out of the church before anybody saw us and walked around behind the building. Elvis squeezed me tightly. "You sing really beautiful," he said. "Thank you. I didn't know you could sing Alleluia." "I love church music, especially gospel. I go to church all the time." "What are you doing here?" I asked, still a bit startled. "I came to see you. Come on. Are you hungry? Let's go get something to eat." We went to the Rendezvous restaurant, an elegant and popular place in the suburban area. We had a wonderful dinner. Elvis wanted to go all out, steaks, champagne, dessert, the works, but I declined the champagne and dessert. I didn't want him to spend his money. As we ate, Elvis kept reaching over and touching my hand. Unfortunately, the evening was almost spoiled when a number of people recognized me from the television and came by the table. I was embarrassed. Elvis was impressed. "You're a star," he said. I felt something crawling up my leg and jerked back. Looking down, I saw a red rose sitting on my chair. He had reached under the table, tickled my leg with it, then left it there. He laughed when I jumped, thinking it was a big bug. The rose was crumbled and wilted, as if he had had it in his pocket all day. He signaled the waiter, and I was presented with 3 fresh red roses with long stems. Pointing to each one, he said, "This one is you, this one is me, and this one represents our love." "I want to show you what it means to love someone and what marriage is," he continued. That confused me, but I let it pass. With all the complications, I didn't want to think about anything like that. We left the restaurant, and Elvis asked if there was a pretty place where we could talk. I directed him to a secluded spot on the Bayou des Yards, a large winding lake that weaves through Monroe. We sat on a bank directly across from the Des Yards Country Club, talked, laughed, kissed, and watched the lights sparkle in the water. As Elvis leaned over to kiss me, his arm got tangled in the gold chain that held the confirmation cross around my neck. The cross fell into the dark grass. We searched but couldn't find it. Elvis promised to get me another to replace it. We had so much fun, I didn't want the evening to ever end. It was getting late, and I was getting worried. He wouldn't take me back until I promised to go to Memphis again soon. He drove to St. Matthew's to drop me off at my car. Before we parked, Elvis looked at me very seriously and said, "When I see you in Memphis, I want you to tell me what's bothering you. Maybe I can help." I said I would. Oh, and that's another thing. So he's always wanting to help people. And so right here, he's wanting to help her. But remember when he was talking to her about having, he kind of sensed things? So that is also something that I've learned about Elvis, is he has like a sixth sense. And he has a way of sensing how others feel. Well, a lot of people can do that, but I mean, it is a talent that's given by God for some people, and he probably had that. But he also had a sense of being able to tell what was going to happen in the future. So, a lot of things he would think about, and then they would happen. So, but right here, he's telling her, he sensed something was going on, and he wants her to tell him about it, and he's offered to help. Okay, so here we go to the author, his research. Lucy's knowledge of Elvis comes exclusively from their times together, so she was unable to explain how Elvis came to perform at the party where they met and why he found it so easy to surprise her in Monroe, a city 300 miles south of his home in Memphis. My research was more enlightening. In the late summer and fall of 1953, Elvis was almost a fixture in Monroe, Louisiana. Nearly a dozen people told me they saw Elvis then. In fact, it's hard to find an old-timer in Monroe who didn't see him. Some recall seeing him playing in a bar on the west side of town called the Red Coach Club. Others say they saw him at a high school, an outdoor party, or at the fairgrounds. James Noe Jr., who now heads the family's television and radio empire, said Elvis was spotted playing in the back of a truck in the parking lot of a local shopping center. This still leaves the question of why. What was it about Monroe that attracted Elvis? Richard Wilcox, a music historian who manages radio station KNOE AM/FM in Monroe, told me. This still leaves the question of why. What was it about Monroe? Oh, I'm sorry. I had to pause and let a cat in the door kept meowing. What was it about Monroe that attracted Elvis? Richard Wilcox, a music historian who manages radio station KNOE AM/FM Monroe, told me. Elvis came to Monroe in 1953 to try to get on the Ouachita Valley Jamboree, a country music show at the Ouachita Valley Fairgrounds, Wilcox said. I think he came in 1952 also, when he was still in high school. The Jamboree was a pretty big deal at the time and was broadcast live on KNOE-FM. Elvis tried out, but he never got to perform. He did get to play at the Red Coach Club and a few other places. Why did the future king of rock and roll fail to make it on the Ouachita Valley Jamboree? Because my husband wouldn't let him, Mary Taylor firmly said. Hugh Taylor ran the Jamboree and chose who played. He died in 1975, but his wife Mary recalled the young singer. Sure, I remember Elvis, Ms. Taylor told me. He came down here a number of times in 1953. Elvis sat in the audience a time or two, checking out the competition. I guess, then asked my husband for a tryout. I was there. He was just a kid then. He didn't have a band or anything, just him and his guitar. He sang okay, but he couldn't stop wiggling that leg of his. That was the problem. He just wiggled around too much when he sang, like he always did. My husband didn't like that at all. We had a family show. There were a lot of children who came. My husband wouldn't let Jerry Lee Lewis perform either the first time he tried because Lewis had this wild white afro. Jerry cut it off and my husband let him on. But Elvis never stopped shaking his leg. The Jamboree was every Saturday night in the exhibit hall of the Ouachita Valley Fairgrounds in West Monroe, which is now where the new Civic Center and City Hall is. We had a lot of big stars on the show, Slim Whitman, Farron Young, and one of my favorites, Webb Pierce. But not Elvis Presley? No, not Elvis. Never, Miss Taylor reiterated. John Birdsong Jr., whose father ran the fairgrounds, also recalled that Elvis tried out for the Jamboree in the fall of 1953. Elvis finally did get to play at the Wichita Fairgrounds a year later as part of Hank Snow's traveling show. That started a series of triumphant returns to the stages or cities where he had once been rejected. So I'm thinking, and it may say it later in this book, I can't remember or not, but because Governor James Noe, ex-Governor James Noe, who owned KNOE radio and TV stations, is where the Wichita Valley Jamboree was broadcast, or the radio station broadcast it. So he probably saw Elvis there. That's where I think he saw him, and he asked him to play his party where he met Lucy. So, yeah, that kind of makes sense. And there is in a book about Elvis never talked about this time of his life, which to me is like, why? Why does he never talk about him going down to Louisiana and trying to make it? He never talks about it. It's like he tried to black it out or something. I don't know. Maybe it would link him to Lucy or something. I don't know. But anyway, he never does talk about it. And so that's why this book is so enlightening of a part of his life that he never really talks about. So a lot of people are like, I don't think it's real or not. But there's a lot of proof that there's been a lot of research, and a lot of it proves that happened to me. But there's a book I read on Elvis and Gladys, his mom, and there's one part in there where it talks about something was going on at his high school back when he was still a student in high school, and I think it was maybe right before he graduated, that he had to rush back because he had been in Louisiana the night before trying out for a show or something the day before, the night before, and he had the long ride back. And a lot of times he would either take the bus or he would hitchhike. So down to Louisiana. So he tried that a couple of years, trying to get on the Wichita Valley Jamboree. And he played over at Red Coach Club. He was trying to learn how to do it. All right, well, that's all we're going to do tonight. This has been 47 minutes, so it's a long one, but it's a juicy one. Got some good stuff in there. So she's met him. So she met him at the Eagle's Nest. Well, she met him at the party, and then a couple weeks later, she goes up to Memphis and sees him playing at the Eagle's Nest. And then the next day, he shows up at the zoo, and they ride horses and talk. And then that night, she goes back to see him at the Eagle's Nest. And then they go out, and he drives her around the city, shows her Memphis, which he's proud of, which I think is, and he did. He loved Memphis. He loved calling Memphis home. And then she gives him the phone number at the TV station and Silverstein's so he can call. And he calls 2 weeks later, and he must have been a Saturday, and he must have been down in Monroe over there at trying out for Wichita Valley Jamboree. And then he came over to meet her while she's singing at that wedding. And then they go out and sit on the riverbank and talk, looking over across the river at the country club. And I looked that up on a map, and sure enough, that where that country club is right there at that river that she talks about in here. And there is like a park area across the street that's been, back then it was a bank, just a bank where they sat and talked, but now it's been, there's no buildings there. It's still a grassy area, so it's like a park. So that's probably where they talked. And if you go over there and maybe use a metal detector, you might find her little cross that's in the grass. All right, well, that's enough for today, and I hope you enjoyed this, and I will talk with you later. Okay, bye.